Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about rational numbers or fractions. The symbol for rational numbers is Q, and that just is the first letter in the word quotient. Now, a rational number is just simply a number that can be written as a fraction. So for example, it's a number that can be written in the form a over b, so something divided by something, something over something, where a and b are integers, so they're elements of the set Z, integers, positive or negative whole numbers, where b here can't be 0. A can be 0, alright, but b can't be 0. Now, we're going to look at, just two other words that I'm going to look at here. The number on the top here is called a numerator. It's just called a numerator. And U-M-E-R-A-T-O-R, numerator. And the number on the bottom then is called a denominator. So, okay, now we're going to look at three different types of fractions. We're going to look at proper fractions, improper fractions, and mixed fractions. Okay, so a proper fraction is any fraction where the numerator is smaller than the denominator. So for example, 2 over 3 or 3 over 7. This number is smaller than this number. The top is smaller than the bottom. An improper fraction then is a fraction which is the other way around, so that the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So for example, 3 over 2 or 7 over 3. So this number here, 3 is bigger than 2, 7 is bigger than 3. That's an improper fraction. And then a mixed fraction is where you've got a whole number and then a fraction added. So 2 and 2/3 or 4 and 7/9, something like that. Okay, so this is a mixed fraction. Now, just looking at improper and mixed fractions again. So let's look at an improper fraction first. So I'm going to look at these two here. If you take 3 over 2, this means this line here means 3 divided by 2. So if you divide 3 by 2, you get 1. So 2 will go into 3 once, but you'll have 1 left over. So it's 1 over 2 left over. So it's a half. So it goes in once and a half left over. If you divide 3 into 7, that goes in twice. So 2 3s will give you 6, and you've got 1 left over. So it's 1/3 left over. So these are equal. So 3 over 2 is 1 1/2. 7 over 3 is 2 1/3. So let's look at these mixed fractions and write them as fractions. So we're going to work this way if you like. So let's take our mixed fraction here. How do you get back to an improper fraction? Well, if you take the number on the bottom here, this 3 here, work around clockwise, go this way, multiply by 2, that will give you 6. Work around here and add. So that will give you 8. So that's just simply 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 2, which is 8, over 3. You use this number here, this denominator here as your denominator here. So that's 8 over 3. So do the same here. 9 times 4, 4 9s 36. 36, we add the 7 then. That will give you 43 over 9. So that's 4 9s are 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 7 left over. So 9 into 43 gives you 4 and 7 left over. So that's equal there. So these two are equal. And these two are equal here. Okay, so let's have a look at adding some fractions then. Now, adding and subtracting, it's exactly the same procedure. Let's do an example. Let's take 2/3, and we're going to add, no, actually what we'll do, we'll take an easier one than that. We'll take a half and a quarter. So I'm going to take 1/2 and we're going to add 1/4. Now, what you've got to do here is take the denominators and turn them into the same number. So what I'm going to do, and the way you do that is you look for a number that both of these numbers will divide into. So if you take 2 and 4, a number that they'll both divide into is 4. Okay, now this 4 here is this 4 here, so we're not going to change that fraction. This quarter is equal to this quarter, so we're not going to change that fraction. But if you take this half here, we've got to change that half. So I'm going to take this half here, and I'm going to turn it into its equivalent fraction. So I'm going to take that half, and I'm going to turn it into what's called its equivalent fraction. Equivalent fraction. So what do we do? Well, we look at this 2 here, and you look at what you had to do to turn it into that 4. You had to multiply it by 2. 2 times 2 will give me this 4. Now, in order for these two fractions to be equal, you have to do exactly the same to the numerator, to the top part of the fraction. So you got to multiply that by 2 as well. So 2 ones here will give me 2. So in other words, this half is exactly the same as this 2 quarters. So this is the irreducible fraction, and this fraction here is the reducible fraction. You can reduce 2 quarters down to a half. So in other words, what I can do here is, instead of writing this half here, I can write 2 quarters. Now this becomes very easy then to actually add. 2 quarters plus 1 quarter will give me 3 quarters. So that's fairly straightforward then. So we have 1 half plus 1 quarter will give me 3 quarters. So if we have a look at this here, we have a fraction strip here. We have this rectangular strip, and it's divided up into quarters. Now if you take the 2 of these quarters, so we're going to take 2 quarters, so I'm just going to, there's 1 quarter, there's another quarter, so that's this 2 quarters here. Okay, so that's this is the 2 quarters part here. From here up to here, I've taken 2 quarters. Now I'm going to add another quarter. So I'm going to add another quarter here. This is the 1 quarter here. So if I take this quarter here, so what I've done is I've taken 2 quarters, I've added another quarter, and look what I've ended up with here. I have ended up with 3 of these quarters. From here to here is 3 quarters. 1, 2, 3, and that's what we got here when we added them. Okay, so that's how you add fractions. If I was to subtract, by the way, if this was a minus here instead of a plus, I would take 2 quarters minus 1 quarter to give me 1 quarter. You take 2 minus 1, which is 1. Okay, so let's have a look at another one then, a little bit more detailed. So let's take this one here. I'll just take this particular thing here. I'll use this in a few minutes. I'm just going to move this down a little bit. So let's take 2/3. So we're going to take, we'll just change the color here back to white again. So I'm just going to take 2/3, and I'm going to add 4/5. Now again, these are not easy to add because we've got thirds and we've got fifths. So we've got to change these to the same, to their equivalent fractions. So let's look at what we can change these to. Now if you take 3 and 5, we can see that they'll both divide into 15. So 3 times 5, in other words, will give me 15. That's a good way of finding a number, the lowest common multiple, or well, a common multiple anyway. It may not necessarily be the lowest, but it is a common multiple. If you multiply 3 by 5, you'll get 15. So that will always work anyway. It may not be the lowest, there may be a lower number. In this case there isn't, but we're going to use 15 anyway. So let's have a look at 2/3. So if we take 2/3 and we want to change that into 15ths, okay? So let's have a look at the number on the bottom here. So we have a 3 here. How can we change that into a 15? Well, we just multiply by 5. So if you do that, you must do the exact same to the top. So we're going to multiply the top by 5 here, and that will give me 10. So in other words, 2/3 is exactly the same as 10/15. They're equivalent fractions. So this here will become 10/15. So I haven't changed 2/3. It's exactly the same. 10/15 is exactly the same as 2/3. Okay, so let's look at the other one then. We have 4/5. We have 4/5, and we want to change that into something over 15. Its equivalent fraction. So let's have a look at doing that. So we have a 5 here, and we want to change that into a 15. How do you do that? You just simply multiply by 3. if you do that to the denominator, you must do exactly the same to the numerator. So we're going to multiply that by 3. That will give me 12. So that will give me 12 here on the top. So I'll just put that in green here. So 12 over 15. So 4/5 is exactly the same as 12/15. Okay, so I can put in 12 here on top. So if I add these two fractions here, it's exactly the same as adding these two fractions here because they are the same fractions. So let's look at what we would get if we do that. Well, we have 10 of these 15ths and we have 12 of these 15ths. That gives me a total of 22 of these 15ths. Now, 22 over 15, 22 divided by 15 is going to be 1 because 15 goes into 22 once. And I have 7 left over, so I have 7 of these 15ths left over. Okay, so this is my answer here, 1 and 7/15. So let's have a look at that by looking at these fraction strips here. How would that work? Well, we had 10 15ths plus 12 15ths. So that's what we wanted to do originally. We had 10 of these 15ths and we added 12 of these 15ths. And we ended up with 1 and 7/15. So this is what we did. Now let's have a look at how we can do that on using our fraction strips here. Well, I have two fraction strips here, and they're both divided up into 15ths. So this is a complete fraction strip, and it's divided up into 1/15, 1/15, 1/15, 1/15, 1/15, and so on. And I have 15 of these 15ths. So there's 15 of these 15ths, there are 15 of these 15ths here to make 1, and I have another 15 of these 15ths here, so I have 15 of these 15ths here to make up another 1. So this is in fact 2 if you like, 1 plus 1 gives me 2. Okay, so let's start colouring these in. So we have 10 15ths, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these 15. So this is 10 15ths from here to here. Now I want to add 12 15ths, so I've got to add another 12 of these. So let's see. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So this will bring me up to 12. This will bring me up to, well, I'm adding another 12 15ths here, and I go all the way up to here, 12 15ths. So what did I end up with? Well, I ended up here with a complete strip filled in, so that's 1. And I also ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these 15ths, 7 of these 15ths here. So this is what I ended up with, 1 and 7/15. And that's what I did get when I did it out using this method up here. So that's it for adding and subtracting. Actually, I might just do a quick subtraction just to show you how that works. Let's take 4/5, and we'll subtract 1/3. Okay, so I'm going to do this fairly quickly because it's really the same method again. I'm going to change these into 15ths again. 5 up to 15 will give me, I must multiply this 5 by 3, so multiply the 4 by 3, that'll give me 12. I must multiply this 3 by 5, so multiply the 1 by 5, that'll give me 5. So really what I end up with is 12 15ths minus 5 15ths this time. That gives me 7 15ths if I subtract. You just subtract the two numbers on the top. Okay, so that's adding and subtracting really. Now I'm going to do multiplying and dividing now. So let's take an example of how you multiply. So let's take 2/3, and we want to multiply that by, we're going to multiply that by, if I can write it in here, multiply, yes, by 3/5. It's very straight. Multiplying is very straightforward. All you got to do is multiply the two numbers on the top to give me 6. 2 times 3 gives me 6. Multiply the two numbers on the bottom, so that's 3 5s 15. And that's it. Now you can see that this is reducible. You can stick this into your calculator or press equals. It'll usually, depending on your calculator, it should simplify it for you. But you can also do it by seeing that you can divide the top by 3 to give you 2. You can divide the bottom by 3 to give you 5. So this is my answer here, 2 over 5. When I multiply 2/3 by 3/5, I get 2 over 5. So that's very straightforward. Multiply the top by the top and the bottom by the bottom. Now to do division then, it's something similar. Take 2/3 and let's say we divide by 3/5 this time. We'll divide by 3/5. So how do you do that? Well, the procedure is simply that you take the second fraction and you flip it. So you take, sorry, I'll just go back here. You take the second fraction and you flip it upside down. So that'll give us 5 over 3. So the first fraction remains the same. The second fraction here, what you're dividing by, you turn it upside down. You find its inverse, in other words. 5 over 3. And now you multiply. You change this division to a multiply. So again, you just do what we did up here. So 2 5s, 10, 3 3s, 9. So that's just 1 and 1/9 as a mixed fraction. 9 divides into 10 once, and you have 1 left over, so that's 1/9. So division and multiplying really go together. You end up multiplying when you divide. You just take the second fraction and you flip it and multiply. If you start with something like this, for example, 2/3 divided by 3/5, this is the fraction you turn upside down and multiply. So in other words, that's the same as 2 over 3 multiplied by 5 over 3 here. Okay, so it's the same thing. So that's multiplying and dividing really. Now, if you start with mixed fractions, usually the best way to do those when you're adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing, is to turn them into improper fractions first. So, for example, if you have let's say 2 and 2/3, and let's say you want to add 4 and 3/5. There are a number of ways of doing this, but the way I like to do them is just simply turn them into improper fractions first. So multiply 3 by 2, you get 6. Add this 2, you get 8. So that's 8 over 3. Then we want to add 5 times 4. 5 times 4 will give me 20. 20 plus 3 will give me 23 over 5. So at this stage we can just add them the same way as I showed you earlier. You just find their equivalent fraction, so it's going to be 15, 15. 3, you must multiply the 3 by 5, so you must multiply the 8 by 5 to give you 40. What do you do to the 5 to give you 15? You multiply by 3, so multiply the top by 3 here. That's 69 over 15. Now you can just add those, 69 plus 40, which will give you 109 over 15. So I did that fairly quickly because I went through the procedure earlier. But basically all I'm saying here is when you start with mixed fractions here, change them into improper fractions first and then go through the procedure that I showed you earlier. There are other ways, but this is the way I like to do it when I'm dealing with mixed fractions.